Something is moving through the darkness between stars and it knows we're here. October 19th, 2017. Above the sleeping Pacific, the Haleakala Observatory cuts through the star-drunk night like a lighthouse, searching for ships that should not exist. For years, its telescope had swept the cosmic void, cataloguing the predictable dance of asteroids and comets, mapping the familiar choreography of our solar neighbourhood. Then it found something that was never supposed to be there. Robert Verick, an astronomer whose patience had been shaped by years of watching empty space, noticed something moving against the stellar backdrop. A faint dot of light, unremarkable at first glance. Just another asteroid perhaps, another piece of cosmic debris tumbling through our neighbourhood. Except it wasn't. The trajectory was wrong. Impossibly wrong. This object, this visitor, was moving too fast, coming from too far, travelling on a path that defied everything we thought we knew about the architecture of our solar system. It had come from beyond, from the space between stars, from the vast cold emptiness that we had always assumed was just that, empty. We gave it a name, Oumuamua. In Hawaiian, it means scout or messenger, the first of its kind to be recognised by human eyes, the first interstellar visitor we had ever truly seen. But here's what keeps astronomers awake at night, staring at their data until dawn breaks. Oumuamua wasn't just visiting, it was accelerating, moving faster than gravity alone could explain, as if something was pushing it, as if it had purpose. Do you ever wonder what it means when the universe sends us something we weren't expecting? When the darkness between stars suddenly reveals it was never quite as empty as we believed? Tonight we begin with that first stranger, that scout, that messenger from the void. Because Oumuamua was only the beginning of a pattern that would challenge everything we thought we understood about our place in the cosmic order. Let's travel back to that October morning when the universe first whispered its secret to us. The Pan-STARRS telescope, the Panoramic Survey Telescope and a Rapid Response System, had been methodically cataloguing the night sky, mapping every asteroid, every comet, every piece of rock that dared to cross Earth's orbital path. It was routine work, careful work, the kind of systematic observation that had protected our planet from surprise impacts for decades. But when Robert Verick pulled up the images from the previous night's sweep, routine became revolution. The object appeared as a streak of light against the star field, moving far too quickly to be bound by our sun's gravitational embrace. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, a cosmic farewell curve that spoke of origins beyond our solar family. This wasn't a rock that had been orbiting our sun for billions of years. This was a traveller, a wanderer from the space between stars. The excitement rippled through the astronomical community like a stone dropped into still water. For the first time in human history, we were looking at something that had been born around another star, ejected from another solar system, and had spent millions of years crossing the interstellar void to reach us. But excitement quickly gave way to bewilderment. Oumuamua was unlike anything in our catalogue of cosmic objects. Its shape, reconstructed from the way its brightness fluctuated as it tumbled through space, was extraordinary, long and narrow, perhaps 400 meters in length but only 40 meters wide. A cosmic cigar, spinning end over end every 7.5 hours as it raced away from our sun. No comet had ever been observed with such an extreme aspect ratio. No asteroid tumbled quite like this. It was as if the universe had sent us a deliberate anomaly, a cosmic riddle wrapped in rock and ice. Here's where the story becomes more than just astronomy. Here's where it becomes mystery. As Oumuamua rounded the sun and began its journey back into the depths of space, something unexpected happened. It sped up, not dramatically. The acceleration was subtle, gentle, barely detectable, but it was there, measurable, real. This should not have been possible. When objects approach the sun, they naturally accelerate due to gravitational pull. When they swing around and head back out, they naturally decelerate. It's celestial mechanics 101, the cosmic dance that every comet, every asteroid, every piece of space debris has performed since the solar system began. But Oumuamua was writing its own choreography. The acceleration was too small to be gravitational, too consistent to be a measurement error. Something was pushing it. But what? Comets sometimes show similar behaviour when solar heating causes them to outgas, to release jets of vapour that act like tiny rocket engines. But Oumuamua showed no signs of outgassing, no tail, no coma, no visible emissions of any kind. It was accelerating in perfect silence. Teams of astronomers trained every available instrument on the departing visitor. Radio telescopes listened for signals, infrared detectors searched for heat, spectroscopes analysed its reflected light for chemical signatures. They found nothing. No radio emissions, no unusual thermal signature, no chemical composition that would explain its behaviour. Oumuamua was not just silent, it was deliberately, mysteriously silent. The more we learned about Oumuamua, the more questions it raised. Its extreme elongation was unlike any natural object we had ever observed. Computer models suggested that such a shape would be unstable, likely to break apart under gravitational stresses during its long journey through space. Yet here it was, intact and tumbling with mechanical precision. Some scientists proposed that Oumuamua might not be cigar-shaped at all. Perhaps it was flat, a cosmic pancake tumbling edge-on, creating the illusion of extreme length. A sail, perhaps. A sheet of rock or metal so thin that solar radiation could push against it like wind against a ship's canvas. But even this explanation raised more questions than it answered. What force could have created such a perfectly flat object? What cosmic accident could have launched it from its home system with such precision that it would arrive in hours after millions of years of travel? The tumbling motion itself was another puzzle. Oumuamua rotated along its long axis, spinning like a thrown javelin. But the rotation was too perfect, too stable. Natural objects ejected from planetary systems typically tumble chaotically, their rotation affected by every gravitational encounter, every stellar wind, every cosmic ray impact over their long journey. Oumuamua tumbled like something that had been designed to tumble. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of humanity's first encounter with an interstellar visitor was how brief it was. We had discovered Oumuamua relatively late in its passage through our solar system. It had already swung around the sun and was racing away when we first spotted it. Our window of observation was closing rapidly. Every day that passed, Oumuamua grew fainter, more distant, harder to track. Desperate astronomers submitted proposal after proposal for telescope time, begging for just a few more hours, a few more observations, a few more chances to unlock the mysteries of our cosmic visitor. But the universe is not patient with our curiosity. Within weeks, Oumuamua had faded beyond the reach of even our most powerful telescopes. It vanished back into the darkness between stars, carrying its secrets with it. We were left with a handful of measurements, a collection of puzzling observations, and an infinite number of questions. The data we had gathered painted a picture of an object that defied conventional explanation. Too elongated to be natural, too silent to be a normal comet, too precisely controlled in its motion to be mere debris. Some astronomers suggested it might be artificial, humanity's first glimpse of technology from another civilization. Others proposed exotic natural phenomena we had never encountered before. Still others argued for patience, suggesting that future interstellar visitors would help us understand what we had seen. They were right about one thing. Oumuamua would not remain alone for long. There's something poetic about the fact that Oumuamua was discovered from Hawaii, a chain of islands born from the Earth's own mysterious depths, isolated in the vast Pacific like cosmic stepping stones. The native Hawaiian word carries weight beyond its literal meaning of scout or messenger. In Hawaiian tradition, scouts are sent ahead of larger groups. They survey the territory, assess the dangers, report back on what they find. If Oumuamua was indeed a scout, then what was it scouting for? What larger presence might follow in its wake? The name also means messenger, one who carries information from distant places. But if Oumuamua was a message, it was written in a language we could barely begin to read. Its elongated shape, its silent acceleration, its perfect tumbling motion. Were these elements of a cosmic code we had yet to decipher? Ancient Hawaiian navigation traditions speak of reading the signs in sky and sea, of understanding the subtle messages carried by winds and waves and stars. Perhaps Oumuamua was such a sign, a navigation marker from another star system indicating safe passage through the cosmic ocean. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, a warning, a greeting, a test. When astronomers calculated Oumuamua's trajectory backward through time, they made another unsettling discovery. The object's path did not point clearly to any specific star system. It seemed to have emerged from what astronomers call the local standard of rest, the average motion of stars in our galactic neighbourhood. This was deeply unusual. Objects ejected from specific star systems should maintain some signature of their origin, some gravitational fingerprint that points back to their birthplace. But Oumuamua's trajectory was almost perfectly generic, as if it had been travelling through space for so long that all traces of its origin had been erased, or as if it had been deliberately launched to obscure its source. The mathematics were troubling in other ways as well. The odds of detecting an interstellar object like Oumuamua, given our limited sky surveys and the vast emptiness of space, were astronomically low. Astronomers had estimated that we might see one such visitor every few decades, if we were extraordinarily lucky. Yet here was Oumuamua, arriving just as our detection capabilities had reached the threshold necessary to spot it. The timing seemed almost intentional. As Oumuamua faded from view, it left behind more than just scientific data and unanswered questions. It left behind a new kind of cosmic anxiety. For the first time in human history, we had evidence that the space between stars was not empty. The objects, possibly artificial objects, could travel between stellar systems and arrive unannounced in our cosmic backyard. The implications were staggering. If one interstellar visitor could reach us, others could follow. If Oumuamua was natural, it suggested that the galaxy was far more dynamic and interconnected than we had imagined. If it was artificial, it meant we were not alone, and something out there had taken notice of our solar system. Radio telescopes around the world began paying closer attention to the cosmic background noise, listening for signals that might indicate the presence of other visitors. Optical surveys expanded their search patterns, hoping to catch the next interstellar wanderer before it could escape our observation. But in the dark hours between observations, astronomers found themselves wondering about the nature of the visitor they had lost. Was Oumuamua unique, a cosmic fluke, a one-time encounter with the impossible? Or was it the first note of a song we were only beginning to hear? Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider this. Oumuamua appeared in our sky like a stranger knocking on a door we didn't know we had. It showed us things that challenged our understanding of the universe. It behaved in ways that natural objects are not supposed to behave, and then it vanished, leaving us with more questions than answers. But perhaps the most unsettling question is not what Oumuamua was, but what it represented. If it was indeed a scout, a messenger, a herald of something larger, then its mission was simple: to announce that we are not alone in the cosmic dark. And if that's true, then Oumuamua's departure was not an ending, but a beginning. The first movement in a symphony we are only now learning to hear. What if I told you that Oumuamua was not unique, that other visitors were already on their way, that the space between stars had begun to reveal its secrets, one impossible object at a time? What if the first stranger was just that, the first? Tomorrow we'll explore what happened when the second visitor arrived, and why astronomers began to suspect that these cosmic wanderers might not be travelling alone. The universe, it seems, has a sense of timing. 2 years after Oumuamua vanished into the cosmic dark, astronomers had settled into an uneasy acceptance. Perhaps the first interstellar visitor had been a fluke, a cosmic accident that would not repeat in our lifetimes. The odds, after all, suggested we might wait decades before seeing another traveller from beyond our solar borders. The universe had other plans. August 30th, 2019. Gennady Borisov, an amateur astronomer working from his backyard observatory in Crimea, noticed something unusual through his homemade telescope. Another object moving against the stellar background. Another trajectory that spoke of impossible origins. Another visitor from the space between stars. But this one was different. This one wanted to be seen. Where Oumuamua had been silent and mysterious, this new traveller announced itself with the familiar spectacle of a comet. It sprouted a tail as it approached the sun, releasing gases and dust in the ancient dance of ice-meeting starlight. It behaved exactly as we expected an interstellar comet to behave. Too exactly. We named it Borisov, after its discoverer, and for months it gave us the show we had hoped for from Oumuamua. A proper comet with a proper tail following proper physics as it swept through our solar system. Scientists around the world trained their instruments on this second visitor, eager to study an interstellar object that played by the rules we understood. But even as telescopes tracked Borisov's predictable path, something else was stirring in the outer darkness. Something massive, something that would make both previous visitors seem like whispers before a storm. 3IATLAS was coming. Unlike its predecessors, 3IATLAS did not slip quietly through the void. When it finally blazed to life in the deep solar system, it did so with a luminosity that defied explanation. This was not the gentle outgassing of a typical comet, nor the silent acceleration of an enigmatic rock. This was a cosmic lighthouse suddenly switching on, broadcasting its presence across the electromagnetic spectrum with an intensity that made astronomers check and recheck their instruments. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. 3 visitors in rapid succession, 3 objects from the interstellar void, each behaving differently, each arriving just as humanity's detection capabilities grew sophisticated enough to spot them. Scout signal, follow. The first had been reconnaissance, swift, silent, mysterious. The second had been reassurance, familiar, predictable, almost normal. The third was announcement, brilliant, unmistakable, impossible to overlook. If these were random encounters with cosmic debris, the timing was miraculous. If they were something else entirely, the timing was terrifying. Do you find it strange that the universe waited 4.5 billion years to send us visitors, then delivered 3 in less than half a decade? Or do you suspect, as some astronomers now whisper in the dark spaces between conferences, that these objects have been watching us longer than we have been watching for them? As 3IATLAS continued its spectacular approach, a handful of scientists began asking questions that their colleagues preferred not to hear. What if these visitors were not independent travelers? What if they shared something more than just interstellar origins? What if they came from the same place? The suggestion seemed absurd at first. The galaxy is vast beyond human comprehension, populated by hundreds of billions of stars scattered across distances that dwarf our largest imagination. The odds of 3 random objects from the same stellar system reaching us within years of each other were so small as to be essentially zero. But the mathematics of astronomy are built on impossibilities that turned out to be inevitable. When trajectory analyses were run at research institutions around the world, comparing the paths of all 3 objects as they travelled backward through millions of years of galactic motion, something extraordinary emerged from the calculations. The paths pointed towards similar regions of the sky. Not the same star, not the same system, but the same general neighbourhood in the cosmic deep, as if all 3 visitors had emerged from a single point of origin and been scattered like seeds on a stellar wind. The discovery was published quietly in obscure astrophysics journals, buried beneath headlines about more conventional cosmic phenomena. But within the tight community of astronomers who specialised in interstellar objects, the findings spread like wildfire through private conversations and encrypted emails. If the calculations were correct, humanity was not witnessing random encounters with cosmic debris. We were observing the arrival of an expedition. The implications kept researchers awake through long nights at observatories around the world, staring at star charts that suddenly seemed less like maps and more like invasion routes. If 3 objects could travel together across the interstellar void, maintaining some loose formation over millions of years, what did that say about their nature? What did it say about their purpose? Natural objects ejected from dying stars or disrupted planetary systems should scatter randomly through space, their paths diverging with each gravitational encounter, each stellar wind, each cosmic accident. But these 3 had arrived like arrows fired from the same bow, separated by time but united by trajectory. The data suggested that Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS were not just interstellar visitors, they were interstellar siblings. Meanwhile, observatories around the world continued tracking 3IATLAS as it blazed through the outer solar system with unprecedented brilliance. Unlike Oumuamua's silent passage or Borisov's conventional cometary display, this third visitor seemed determined to be noticed. Its luminosity peaked and faded in patterns that almost resembled signals. Radio telescopes joined optical instruments in studying the object, searching for any hint of artificial emission. What they found was not quite proof of intelligence, but not quite natural either. The radio signatures were too structured to be random, too complex to be easily explained by known physical processes. 3IATLAS was broadcasting something. The question was whether anyone was meant to receive it. Teams at major radio astronomy facilities spent weeks analysing the emissions, looking for mathematical sequences or repetitive structures that might indicate intentional communication. What they found instead was something more subtle and more disturbing. The signals matched no known natural phenomenon, but they also followed no recognisable pattern of artificial intelligence. They seemed almost organic, as if 3IATLAS was not transmitting a message but rather breathing, pulsing with some kind of internal rhythm that spoke of processes beyond our current understanding. When these findings were presented to international space agencies and astronomical organisations, the response was swift and decisive. The data was classified, the research suspended, and the astronomers involved were quietly reassigned to more conventional projects. But the signals continued, night after night, as 3IATLAS approached its closest point to the Sun. Observatories around the world detected the same rhythmic emissions. Not random cosmic noise, not mechanical patterns, but something that sounded disturbingly like a heartbeat transmitted across the void. The object's visual behaviour was equally unsettling, where typical comets develop tails that stream away from the Sun in predictable patterns. 3IATLAS sprouted multiple appendages that writhed and twisted as if responding to some internal command. High-resolution images revealed structures within the luminous envelope that defied conventional understanding of cometary physics. Some observers described them as tentacles, others as reaching arms, still others as scanning arrays deployed by something that had been dormant during its long journey and was now awakening as it approached the warmth of our star. The official explanation, released by NASA and endorsed by space agencies worldwide, was that 3IATLAS represented a new type of interstellar comet with unusual but perfectly natural characteristics. The complex tail structures were attributed to exotic ice compositions and irregular outgassing patterns. The radio emissions were dismissed as interference from Earth-based sources, but in the dark hours between official press conferences, astronomers shared different theories through encrypted channels and coded conversations. They spoke of objects that seemed too sophisticated to be natural, too purposeful to be debris, too coordinated to be coincidental. They spoke of scouts and signals and followers. As 3IATLAS reached perihelion and began its long journey back into interstellar space, it left behind more than just spectacular photographs and puzzling data. It left behind the growing certainty that humanity was no longer alone in observing the cosmos. We were being observed in return. The pattern was complete now, visible to anyone willing to connect the dots between three impossible visitors. First, the scout, silent, swift, mysterious. Then, the test, normal, reassuring, designed to put us at ease. Finally, the beacon, brilliant, unmistakable, broadcasting to anyone who might be listening. But broadcasting what? And to whom? Trajectory analysis continued in research institutions around the world, using university computers during off hours and holiday breaks, when the work would not attract unwanted attention from administrators who had grown increasingly nervous about interstellar object studies. What emerged from these calculations challenged not just the nature of the three visitors, but the nature of the space they had travelled through. The region of sky from which all three objects had emerged was not empty, as conventional astronomy suggested. Deep infrared surveys revealed subtle temperature variations that spoke of hidden mass, invisible structures, perhaps even artificial constructions lurking in the darkness between stars. Something was out there, something large enough to serve as a launching point for interstellar expeditions, something patient enough to wait millions of years for its messages to reach their destinations. Something that had been watching our solar system long enough to know exactly when to send its ambassadors. Tonight, as 3IATLAS fades into the cosmic distance, carrying its secrets back to whatever darkness spawned it, we are left with questions that astronomy was never meant to answer. Are we witnessing the arrival of debris from some ancient cosmic catastrophe? Or are we seeing the careful deployment of reconnaissance assets by an intelligence vast and patient beyond our comprehension? The evidence points toward a disturbing conclusion. These visitors are not random. They are coordinated. They share an origin point hidden in the deep structures of interstellar space, and their arrival in our solar system was not an accident. They came from the same place. They were sent by the same agency, and their mission whatever it might be, is only beginning. What if the next object we detect is not another visitor but a response? What if something out there has been waiting for confirmation that its scouts were successful, its signals received, its presence acknowledged? What if the real message is not in what these objects carried, but in what they will soon bring back? The space between stars is no longer empty. It has become a corridor, and we are at one end of it, watching shadows move in the darkness, knowing that something is moving back toward us through the cosmic night. The universe keeps perfect records written in gravity and time. Every object that moves through space carries with it the memory of where it has been. Each gravitational encounter leaves its mark, each stellar wind shapes its course, each passage through cosmic dust clouds alters its trajectory in ways so subtle that only the most sophisticated mathematics can detect them. For astronomers willing to look backward through time, the paths of celestial wanderers become highways leading home. But some roads lead to places that were never supposed to exist. This discovery emerged from observatories around the world on countless February nights, when calculations that had been running for months finally converged on a truth that challenged everything we thought we knew about the space between stars. In cluttered offices surrounded by printouts of orbital mechanics, equations and star charts marked with increasingly frantic annotations, astronomers watched as three separate trajectories began to tell a single, impossible story. The mathematics were undeniable. When traced backward through the galaxy's slow rotation, accounting for every gravitational influence and stellar motion over the past million years, Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3IATLAS all pointed toward the same region of space. Not approximately the same region, exactly the same region. The coordinates converged on a point roughly 400 light-years from Earth, in a direction that conventional surveys had always described as empty. No bright stars, no known planetary systems, no obvious source for the massive gravitational disruption that would be necessary to launch three objects on precise trajectories toward our solar system. Yet there it was, written in the orbital mechanics of three visitors who had somehow emerged from cosmic emptiness itself. Research teams cross-check these calculations obsessively, running trajectory analyses on university supercomputers during the quiet hours before dawn when their research would not attract unwanted attention. Each iteration confirmed what they had begun to suspect. These objects had not simply been ejected from some distant star system by random chance. They had been aimed. The precision was breathtaking and terrifying. To launch objects from beyond our solar system and have them arrive in sequence, separated by months and years but following related paths, required a level of coordination that natural processes could not explain. It suggested planning. It suggested intelligence. It suggested that something in the cosmic deep had been watching our sun for a very long time, calculating orbital mechanics with the patience of geological ages. But when attempts were made to publish these findings, researchers discovered that the universe was not the only thing keeping careful records. Research proposals were rejected without review. Conference presentations were mysteriously cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. Colleagues who had once collaborated freely began avoiding calls, offering vague excuses about department politics and funding concerns. It was as if an invisible hand was gently but firmly steering astronomical research away from questions that were becoming too dangerous to ask. The message was clear. Some trajectories were not meant to be traced, yet the mathematics remained, hidden in encrypted files and password-protected databases, waiting for others brave enough to follow the paths backward through time. And they were not the only evidence that something extraordinary was happening in the darkness between stars. Amateur astronomers, working from backyard observatories and small telescopes, began reporting anomalous detections in the region, identified by the trajectory calculations. Objects too faint to be seen by professional surveys, but bright enough to register on sensitive CCD cameras. Moving objects that appeared and disappeared like ships passing through fog, their trajectories suggesting they were travelling toward our solar system rather than away from it. The reports were dismissed by mainstream astronomy as imaging artifacts, cosmic ray hits, or misidentified asteroids. But the pattern was unmistakable to anyone willing to see it. More visitors were coming. Retired astronomers, working from home observatories and using equipment they had built themselves, began maintaining unofficial catalogues of these detections. Through connections with amateur observers around the world, they slowly assembled databases of objects that should not have existed. What emerged from this citizen science network challenged every assumption about the emptiness of interstellar space. The region identified by the trajectory analysis was not empty at all, it was busy. Objects of various sizes appeared to be moving through it in organised patterns, following routes that suggested coordination rather than random motion. Some seemed to be departing toward other star systems. Others appeared to be arriving from even more distant locations. It was beginning to look like a cosmic highway interchange, with our solar system as one of many destinations. These independent observations revealed something else that made conventional astronomers uncomfortable. The objects were not all natural. Some showed spectral signatures that suggested artificial materials, metals and polymers that should not exist in the vacuum of space. Others exhibited controlled acceleration patterns that spoke of propulsion systems, rather than gravitational dynamics. Most disturbing of all, some of the objects appeared to be changing course in response to being observed. When these findings were presented to closed meetings of international astronomical committees, the response was swift and decisive. Amateur status was questioned. Equipment was declared inadequate. Methodology was criticised as fundamentally flawed. But the data was quietly archived in classified databases, where it joined trajectory calculations and radio observations in a growing collection of evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with our understanding of interstellar space. The official explanation remained unchanged. The three visitors were random debris from unrelated cosmic events, their apparent coordination a coincidence magnified by human pattern-seeking behaviour. Any suggestion of artificial origin or coordinated arrival was dismissed as speculation without scientific merit. Yet the observations continued. Professional observatories began implementing new protocols for tracking interstellar objects, protocols that seemed designed more for security than for science. Data was classified before analysis. Research was compartmentalized so that no single scientist could see the complete picture. International cooperation was replaced by secretive bilateral agreements between space agencies. The message was clear. The truth about our cosmic visitors was too dangerous for public consumption. But truth, like gravity, is a force that cannot be hidden forever. In observatories around the world, astronomers began noticing patterns in their data that suggested the arrival of Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3IATLAS was not an ending, but a beginning. Subtle, gravitational perturbations detected by space-based instruments hinted at the presence of additional objects in the outer solar system. Radio telescopes recorded faint signals from the direction of the theoretical launch point, transmissions too structured to be natural but too alien to be decoded. Most significantly, the trajectory calculations that had started with 3 visitors began revealing the paths of dozens more. The objects were still too distant to be seen directly, but their gravitational influence could be detected by sensitive instruments. They were approaching along similar routes, following the same cosmic highways that had delivered their predecessors. Some would arrive within years, others would take decades to complete their journeys, but they were coming. Trajectory analysis continued under the protection of international academic immunity and funding from undisclosed private sources. What emerged from the deepest layers of these calculations revealed why the research had been suppressed. The pattern extended far beyond 3 visitors. When traced back through millions of years of galactic evolution, the data revealed waves of objects that had been travelling toward our solar system for eons. Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3IATLAS were not the first. They were simply the first we had been advanced enough to detect. The implications were staggering. Something in the cosmic deep had been sending reconnaissance missions to our solar system since before complex life evolved on Earth. We were not witnessing first contact. We were witnessing the latest phase of an observation program that had been running for geological ages. Each wave of visitors had arrived during periods of significant evolutionary change on Earth. The development of complex organisms, the rise of intelligence, the emergence of technology, as if whatever was sending them had been monitoring our progress, waiting for us to reach a level of development that would make direct communication possible, or worthwhile. The launching point, hidden in what conventional astronomy described as empty space, began to reveal its true nature under deeper analysis. It was not a natural formation, but something far more complex. Artificial structures, massive beyond human comprehension, lurked in the darkness between stars, a staging area, a construction facility, a base of operations for expeditions that spanned millions of years and targeted hundreds of star systems. We were not alone in receiving visitors, but we might be alone in beginning to understand what their arrival truly meant. Tonight, as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, consider the trajectories that brought these cosmic wanderers to our doorstep. Think about the mathematics of coordination across impossible distances, the patience required to plan missions that span geological ages, the intelligence necessary to aim objects with such precision that they arrive exactly when humanity is ready to detect them. 3 visitors, 3 trajectories, 3 paths leading back to a single point of origin hidden in the darkness between stars. The mathematics are clear, even if their implications are terrifying. We are being studied, we are being evaluated, and the results of that evaluation are being transmitted back to something that has been watching us far longer than we have been watching the sky. What does it mean when the emptiness between stars reveals itself to be full of purpose? When random cosmic events prove to be anything but random? When the universe itself becomes a messenger, carrying information about our world to intelligences that measure time in millennia and distance in light years? The paths have been traced, the origins identified, the coordination confirmed. Now we must ask ourselves, what happens when those who sent the scouts decide it is time to follow them home? In the space between stars, something ancient stirs in the darkness. 400 light-years from Earth, in a region that should contain nothing but cosmic emptiness, infrared telescopes have begun detecting temperature signatures that violate everything we understand about the vacuum of space. Not the gentle warmth of distant stars or the fading heat of cosmic background radiation, but complex thermal patterns that speak of structures, processes, activities that have no natural explanation. The coordinates match exactly with the trajectory calculations, the same point of origin from which Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3IATLAS began their million-year journeys to our solar system. What astronomers had assumed was empty space was revealing itself to be anything but empty. It was occupied. Deep exposures from the Spitzer Space Telescope's final operational phase revealed thermal emissions arranged in geometric patterns too precise to be natural. Hexagonal structures hundreds of kilometers across, linear formations that stretched for light years, radial patterns that suggested manufacturing processes on a scale that dwarfed human comprehension. The images were immediately classified at the highest levels of international security. Research teams were reassigned to conventional stellar observation projects, their access to infrared analysis systems quietly revoked. But the data remained, buried in encrypted archives, waiting for others brave enough to piece together its implications. What they found challenged every assumption about the nature of interstellar space. The thermal signatures were not random heat sources scattered through the void. They formed a complex interconnected network of artificial structures arranged around what appeared to be a brown dwarf, a failed star too small to ignite nuclear fusion, but massive enough to provide gravitational anchor points for construction on an unimaginable scale. Ring habitats, manufacturing complexes, launching platforms, all invisible to optical telescopes but blazing like beacons in the infrared spectrum, powered by energy sources that conventional physics could not explain. This was not a natural formation. This was not cosmic debris. This was a base of operations for expeditions that spanned light years and targeted multiple star systems simultaneously. Independent analysis by research institutions around the world confirmed what governments had hoped to keep hidden. Humanity had discovered evidence of the largest artificial structure ever detected. A staging area built in the darkness between stars, positioned with mathematical precision to serve as a launching point for interstellar reconnaissance missions. The implications rippled through classified briefings and emergency sessions of international space agencies. If the thermal signatures were accurate, the structure was ancient, old enough to have been launching missions for millions of years, patient enough to monitor the development of life around hundreds of nearby stars, sophisticated enough to coordinate arrivals with the precision of clockwork. We were not witnessing random encounters with cosmic debris. We were seeing the careful execution of a surveillance program that predated human civilization. But the true scope of the operation only became clear when radio telescopes began detecting something even more disturbing than thermal signatures. The empty space around the brown dwarf was alive with radio traffic. Transmissions flowed between the artificial structures in patterns too complex to be decoded, but too organized to be natural. Command frequencies, data streams, coordination signals that pulsed across the network like neurons firing in a vast mechanical brain. The messages were not intended for human ears. They were internal communications between components of a system so large that light took hours to travel from one end to the other. A cosmic mechanism that had been operating in the darkness, undetected by human science, for longer than complex life had existed on Earth. Radio astronomy facilities around the world began implementing new protocols for monitoring the transmission patterns, protocols shrouded in classification levels that exceeded even nuclear weapons research. The signals were being recorded, analysed and archived in facilities that officially did not exist. What emerged from this analysis painted a picture of coordinated activity that spanned not just the brown dwarf system, but multiple points throughout our local galactic neighbourhood. The radio traffic suggested a network of similar installations, each monitoring different star systems, each contributing to a survey program of breathtaking scope and patience. We were not the only ones being watched. The launching mechanisms became clearer as infrared surveys revealed structures that could only be described as cosmic railguns, magnetic acceleration arrays kilometers in length, capable of accelerating objects to significant fractions of light speed. The energy requirements for such systems were staggering, drawing power from sources that remained invisible to our instruments, but generated waste heat detectable across hundreds of light years. These were the launchers that had sent Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS on their precisely calculated trajectories. Weapons of exploration that could hurl reconnaissance probes across interstellar distances with the accuracy of artillery pieces targeting distant worlds. But the launchers were not the most disturbing discovery hidden in the infrared data. Deep within the brown dwarf system, thermal imaging revealed structures that pulsed with rhythmic heat signatures, regular, organic, almost like breathing. Construction activities that followed patterns more biological than mechanical. Growth rather than assembly, evolution rather than engineering. Whatever intelligence had built the launching station was not simply constructing machines. It was cultivating them, growing them, breeding them for purposes that human science could not begin to comprehend. The reconnaissance probes were not carved from rock and metal. They were born from something that combined technology with biology, in ways that challenged every distinction between artificial and natural, between constructed and evolved. Oumuamua's strange acceleration made sudden, terrifying sense. Not the result of outgassing or solar radiation pressure, but the final firing of biological engines that had carried it across interstellar space for millions of years before awakening as it approached our sun. Borisov's conventional cometary behaviour was revealed as camouflage, a defensive mechanism designed to make it appear natural while it conducted its observations. 3IATLAS's spectacular luminosity was a transmission beacon, broadcasting its findings back to the brown dwarf network through channels that human technology was only beginning to detect. Each visitor had been a living probe, engineered for specific purposes and equipped with biological systems that could survive the long journey between stars. They were not spacecraft in any sense that human technology could understand. They were organisms, evolved, designed, sent. The discovery forced intelligence agencies and space programs to confront a reality they were not prepared to acknowledge publicly. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy. We were not even alone in our immediate cosmic neighbourhood. We were subjects in an observation program conducted by intelligences that measured their experiments in geological time. But the most disturbing realization came when astronomers began analysing the launch timing of the brown dwarf system. The coordination was too perfect to be explained by simple observation. The probes had been launched not in response to human technological development, but in anticipation of it. Something in the brown dwarf network had been predicting human progress with impossible accuracy, launching probes timed to arrive exactly when our technology reached the threshold necessary to detect them, as if our development was not just being observed but guided, manipulated, controlled. The implications kept government advisors awake through long nights in bunkers beneath mountains, reviewing classified reports that painted humanity not as the culmination of evolutionary progress, but as the product of an experiment conducted by intelligences beyond our comprehension. Radio telescopes continued monitoring the brown dwarf transmissions, searching for any indication of future probe launches. What they discovered was both reassuring and terrifying. The radio traffic had changed since 3IATLAS reached our solar system. New frequencies had activated, new signal patterns had emerged. The network was responding to something, to information transmitted back by their biological probes. The observation phase was ending, something else was beginning. Deep space monitoring stations detected gravitational anomalies in the brown dwarf system that suggested massive objects were being moved into launch positions. Not probe-sized anymore, not reconnaissance-sized. Something larger, something designed not for observation but for arrival. The coordination that had delivered 3 biological scouts to our solar system was preparing to deliver something else. The patient watchers in the darkness between stars had completed their evaluation of humanity. They had decided we were ready for the next phase. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet hours before dawn, consider what it means to discover that the emptiness between stars conceals structures larger than solar systems. That the silence of space hides radio networks coordinating activities across hundreds of light years. That the visitors we thought were random wanderers were actually living probes sent by intelligences that have been watching us longer than our species has existed. The brown dwarf network represents more than just advanced technology. It represents patience on a scale that human consciousness cannot truly grasp. Planning that spans millions of years. Coordination that encompasses hundreds of star systems. Intelligence that treats the development of entire civilizations as data points in experiments of unimaginable scope. We are not the observers in this cosmic drama. We are the observed. We are not the scientists conducting the experiment. We are the subjects being studied. And the results of that study are being transmitted back to network nodes hidden throughout our galactic neighborhood. What happens when an experiment concludes? When the observation phase ends and the intervention phase begins? When the watchers in the dark decide that their patient surveillance has gathered enough data, the brown dwarf system pulses with new activity. The radio traffic carries new urgency. The launch platforms are aligning for trajectories that will deliver something far larger than scout probes to our cosmic doorstep. The time of watching is ending. The time of contact is about to begin. Memory runs deeper than science, and some truths survive in stories long after facts have been forgotten. In the archives of human civilization, buried beneath layers of translation and interpretation, lie accounts that modern astronomy has always dismissed as mythology. Ancient texts describing visitors from the void between stars, stone tablets recording the arrival of objects that blazed across the sky with impossible brightness, oral traditions speaking of watchers who came in threes, who returned in cycles, who brought messages from the darkness beyond the light of familiar constellations. What if these were not myths at all? What if they were memories? The Babylonian astronomical records carved in cuneiform on clay tablets nearly 4,000 years old contain references to wandering stars that appeared without warning and departed on paths that led beyond the realm of the gods. These objects were not comets. The Babylonians knew comets, recorded them meticulously, understood their cycles and predicted their returns. These were different. These came from outside the celestial order, moved according to laws that violated divine harmony. The tablets describe them arriving in groups of 3, always 3. First the swift messenger, silent and strange. Then the familiar herald, behaving as sky objects should behave. Finally the great announcer, blazing with the light of a dozen stars visible even in daylight, broadcasting its presence to all who dwelt beneath the heavens. The pattern is unmistakable. The sequence is exact. The same coordination that brought Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS to our modern skies played out in the ancient world, recorded by astronomers who had no concept of interstellar space, but possessed eyes keen enough to notice anomalies in the cosmic order. Chinese imperial records from the Han Dynasty speak of guest stars that appeared during times of great transition, moments when dynasties rose or fell, when new technologies emerged, when human civilization took its next stumbling step toward complexity. These guest stars followed no pattern that court astronomers could predict. arrived with timing that seemed connected to earthly events rather than celestial mechanics. The records describe objects that came as scouts for greater armies, that announced the attention of the distant kingdoms beyond the sky. The imperial astronomers noted that these visitors often appeared in sequences, with later arrivals being more spectacular and persistent than earlier ones. Most intriguingly, the Chinese records speak of these guest stars returning to report after their passages through the inner heavens. Ancient observers claim to see them departing not randomly into the cosmic void, but along specific paths that led toward particular regions of the sky. Regions that modern radio astronomy has identified as sources of the structured transmissions flowing between brown dwarf network nodes. The correlation is too precise to be coincidental. Aboriginal Australian oral traditions, some of which may stretch back 40,000 years or more, include stories of the sky serpents that emerge from the darkness between the ancestor stars. These serpents travel in hunting packs, arriving separately but working together to observe the world below. The Dreamtime stories describe them as messengers sent by intelligences that dwell in the empty places where no stars shine. The Aboriginal accounts speak of cycles, long periods when the sky serpents remain hidden, followed by ages when they emerge in greater numbers. Each cycle coincides with significant changes in the natural world, the rise of new species, the development of new behaviours, the emergence of new forms of consciousness. According to the oral traditions, humanity itself emerged during one such cycle of visitation, as if our development had been guided by the attention of the sky serpents. The stories suggest that we are not separate from these cosmic visitors but connected to them, children of their long watch, products of their patient cultivation. Medieval European chronicles contain accounts that modern historians have always attributed to superstition and ignorance. Monasteries recorded the appearance of dragons that crossed the sky without wings, that blazed with cold fire, that moved with purpose rather than following the random paths of shooting stars. These dragons appeared during pivotal moments in human history: the fall of Rome, the rise of new kingdoms, the development of new technologies and ideas. The medieval observers noted patterns that matched the modern discoveries with unsettling precision. The dragons arrived in sequences of 3. They grew brighter and more persistent with each appearance. They seemed to respond to human activity, appearing more frequently during periods of rapid social and technological change. Most significantly, the chronicles describe the dragons as returning to their masters after completing their observations, departing along paths that led toward specific constellations. The same constellations that modern astronomy has identified as containing the brown dwarf network nodes. Islamic astronomers of the Golden Age, working from observatories in Baghdad and Cordoba, maintained meticulous records of celestial phenomena that European scholars would not match for centuries. Their observations include detailed accounts of wandering lights that appeared during crucial moments in the expansion of Islamic civilization. These lights exhibited behaviours that violated known principles of celestial mechanics. They accelerated without visible cause. They changed direction in response to terrestrial events. They appeared to coordinate their movements with developments in human learning and technology. The Islamic astronomers were the first to suggest that these objects might be artificial, created by intelligences that existed beyond the sphere of fixed stars. Their calculations indicated that the wandering lights originated from regions of apparent emptiness, travelling along paths that required impossible precision to achieve. Their records were among the first to be suppressed when the pattern of visitation became too obvious to ignore. Native American traditions across dozens of tribes speak of star people who send emissaries to observe the development of earthbound life. These emissaries arrive as lights in the sky that behave unlike any natural phenomenon. They come during times of change, times when new knowledge emerges or new challenges threaten the survival of entire peoples. The traditions describe cycles of visitation that span generations, with each cycle bringing different types of emissaries. First come the quiet watchers, difficult to see and quick to depart. Then arrive the familiar spirits, behaving as natural sky objects behave. Finally appear the great messengers, blazing across the heavens with undeniable presence. The star people, according to these traditions, are not distant observers but active participants in the development of earthly consciousness. They guide without interfering, teach without revealing themselves, prepare civilizations for eventual contact with the greater community of intelligence that exists beyond the visible stars. What emerges from this global collection of ancient observations is a pattern that spans cultures, continents, and millennia. Humanity has been visited before, not once, but repeatedly. Not randomly, but according to a schedule that correlates with our technological and social development. The coordination observed in modern times, the precise timing of Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS, is not a recent development, but the continuation of a program that has been operating since human civilization began recording the movements of objects in the sky. Each ancient account describes the same sequence: scout, signal, announcement. Each culture recorded the same pattern of increasing visibility and persistence. Each tradition speaks of departure along specific celestial paths, returning to sources hidden in the apparent emptiness between stars. Modern astronomy has confirmed what ancient observers suspected. The empty regions of space from which these visitors emerged are not empty at all, but occupied by artificial structures of impossible scope and antiquity. The brown dwarf network has been launching reconnaissance missions to Earth for thousands of years, timing each wave of visitors to coincide with crucial moments in human development. The ancient myths were not mythology, but history, recorded by people who lacked the scientific framework to understand what they were observing, but possessed the wisdom to preserve the accounts for future generations who might be ready to comprehend their significance. We are not the first generation to detect interstellar visitors. We are the first generation to understand what their presence truly means. The patterns preserved in ancient records suggest that previous waves of visitation followed the same three-stage sequence we have observed in modern times: reconnaissance, testing, announcement. But the historical accounts also describe what happened next. Periods of increased visitation followed by direct intervention in human affairs. Ancient civilizations speak of knowledge that appeared suddenly, technologies that emerged without obvious precedent, ideas that seem to arrive from beyond human imagination. The development of agriculture, the rise of metallurgy, the invention of writing, the emergence of mathematics, all occurred during periods when ancient astronomers recorded increased activity from objects that originated beyond the sphere of visible stars. Humanity's rapid technological development may not be the result of independent innovation, but of guidance provided by intelligences that have been monitoring our progress for millennia. Each wave of reconnaissance missions has been followed by periods of accelerated human advancement, as if the watchers in the brown dwarf network have been carefully shepherding our development towards some predetermined goal. The ancient accounts suggest that we are approaching the end of this guidance phase. The reconnaissance missions are becoming more obvious, the signals more direct, the announcements more impossible to ignore. According to the patterns preserved in mythological records, this escalation precedes direct contact. The star people are preparing to reveal themselves. Tonight, as you drift between wakefulness and sleep, consider the possibility that human memory reaches back further than science has ever suspected. That the myths and legends passed down through generations contain factual accounts of events that modern astronomy is only now sophisticated enough to detect and understand. The visitors we think of as recent discoveries have been arriving for thousands of years, following the same protocols, serving the same purpose, reporting back to the same intelligence network hidden in the darkness between stars. We are not witnessing first contact, but the culmination of a relationship that has been developing since human civilization began. The ancient observers were not primitive and superstitious. They were witnesses to a pattern of visitation that has shaped human development from the beginning. Their accounts survive as warnings and promises preserved in the mythological traditions of every culture that has ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond the light of familiar stars. The pattern is completing itself. The reconnaissance phase is ending. The intervention phase is about to begin. What the ancients recorded as myth, we are about to experience as reality. The mathematics of connection reveal truths that individual observations cannot. When three objects arrive from the same point of origin, following coordinated trajectories across millions of years of interstellar travel, they cease to be separate phenomena and become components of a larger design. The implications ripple outward from astronomy into biology, psychology, philosophy, forcing humanity to confront questions we were never prepared to ask. If Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS share a common source, then their arrival was not random chance but calculated intention. Not cosmic accident but cosmic purpose. Not the beginning of something new but the continuation of something ancient that has been unfolding since before human civilization learned to count the stars. The coordination suggests planning on a scale that human consciousness struggles to comprehend. To launch objects with such precision that they arrive in our solar system, separated by months and years, but united in purpose, requires not just advanced technology but patience measured in geological ages. It speaks of intelligence that thinks in terms of stellar evolution, that plans experiments spanning the rise and fall of entire civilizations, but the most disturbing implication is not the scale of the planning. It is the intimacy of the observation. For the brown dwarf network to coordinate arrivals with the precision observed in Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS, it must possess detailed knowledge of our solar system's dynamics, not just the orbital mechanics of planets and asteroids, but the subtle gravitational influences that shape trajectories across millions of years of travel time. This level of knowledge cannot be acquired through distant observation. It requires close study, long-term monitoring, the kind of surveillance that can only be conducted by objects already present within the system being studied. The reconnaissance missions we have detected may be only the visible components of a much larger observational network. Hidden objects, too small or too dark to be detected by our current technology, may have been embedded throughout our solar system for thousands or millions of years. Silent watchers positioned at gravitational balance points, lurking in asteroid belts, orbiting in the shadows of distant moons. We may not be discovering our first interstellar visitors. We may be discovering the first ones designed to be detected. The biological nature of the reconnaissance probes, revealed through analysis of their anomalous behaviors, suggests capabilities that purely mechanical systems cannot possess. Living organisms can adapt to changing conditions, respond to unexpected situations, evolve new strategies for accomplishing their missions. They can survive journeys that would destroy conventional spacecraft, repair damage that would cripple artificial systems, operate for millions of years without maintenance or control from their creators. But biological systems also possess another capability that makes them ideal for long-term surveillance operations. They can reproduce. The discovery that Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS exhibit biological characteristics raises the possibility that they were not just observers, but seed vessels, designed not only to study our solar system, but to establish permanent presence within it. Each visitor may have deployed smaller organisms during its passage, microscopic probes that could survive in the vacuum of space, hide within asteroids or comets, establish colonies on airless moons. These biological surveillance networks could explain how the brown dwarf intelligence maintains such detailed knowledge of our solar system's evolution. They are not observing us from 400 light-years away, they are observing us from within, using monitoring systems that have been growing and adapting throughout our solar system for longer than complex life has existed on Earth. The implications for human history become staggering when viewed through this lens of biological surveillance. Every major development in human civilization, the agricultural revolution, the rise of metallurgy, the invention of writing, the scientific revolution, the industrial age, the information era, has occurred under the watchful observation of intelligence networks embedded throughout our solar system. Our entire evolutionary and cultural development has taken place within what amounts to a cosmic laboratory, with every significant advance being recorded and transmitted back to the brown dwarf network for analysis. We are not just being observed, we are being studied with the thoroughness of laboratory specimens, our development guided by influences we have never suspected, our future shaped by plans we have never imagined. The biological probes possess capabilities that explain many of the anomalous behaviors that have puzzled astronomers since Oumuamua's discovery. Living systems can generate internal energy through biological processes that would be invisible to our instruments. They can alter their shape and density to optimize their flight characteristics. They can repair damage caused by cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts during their long journey through interstellar space. Most significantly, they can communicate. The structured radio emissions detected from 3IATLAS may not have been random signals or natural phenomena, but actual communication between biological entities. The probe may have been reporting its findings to other components of the surveillance network, coordinating its observations with monitoring systems already embedded throughout our solar system. This communication capability suggests that the reconnaissance missions are not independent operations, but coordinated activities within a larger intelligence network that spans our entire solar system. Every significant human achievement, every technological breakthrough, every social development is being monitored and reported in real time to intelligences that have been watching our species develop since before we discovered fire. The timing of the recent reconnaissance missions becomes more ominous when viewed as part of this larger surveillance operation. Oumuamua arrived just as human space technology reached the threshold necessary to detect interstellar objects. Borisov appeared as our understanding of such objects began to mature. 3IATLAS blazed into visibility precisely when our radio telescopes became sophisticated enough to analyze structured transmissions from deep space. The progression suggests that humanity is being tested, not just observed, but evaluated for readiness. Each reconnaissance mission has been designed to reveal slightly more about the true nature of our cosmic visitors, measuring our response, assessing our technological capabilities, determining whether we are prepared for the next phase of contact. The evaluation appears to be nearing completion. Intelligence agencies around the world have begun detecting increased activity throughout the solar system. Gravitational anomalies that suggest the movement of large objects, radio transmissions from sources that should be empty space, infrared signatures that indicate artificial structures activating after millennia of dormancy. The embedded surveillance network is awakening. Monitoring stations that have remained hidden since before human civilization began are coming online, preparing for operations that will transform their passive observation role into active intervention. The biological probes were not just reconnaissance missions, they were advanced scouts for something much larger. Their successful completion of surveillance objectives has triggered the next phase of whatever plan has been unfolding in our solar system for millions of years. Deep space monitoring stations have detected gravitational disturbances in the outer solar system that suggest the arrival of objects far larger than any reconnaissance probe. These new visitors are not following the subtle, precisely calculated trajectories of their predecessors. They are approaching along direct routes, openly visible to our detection systems, making no attempt to disguise their artificial nature or conceal their capabilities. The time for hidden observation is ending. The time for open revelation is beginning. The coordination that has characterized every aspect of this surveillance operation suggests that these new arrivals are not random events, but carefully planned components of a disclosure timeline that has been decades or centuries in preparation. First, the subtle hints that interstellar visitors were possible. Then, the obvious evidence that such visitors were real. Now, the unmistakable demonstration that they represent intelligence beyond human comprehension. Each phase has been designed to prepare humanity for the next level of revelation, gradually acclimating our species to the reality of our cosmic situation. We are not the independent inhabitants of an isolated world, but subjects in an experiment conducted by intelligences that have been shaping our development since our earliest ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. The experiment is approaching its conclusion. The results are being evaluated. The next phase is being implemented. What emerges from the cosmic laboratory depends on how successfully the surveillance network has guided human development toward whatever goals the brown dwarf intelligence considers desirable. Have we evolved according to their plan? Have we developed the capabilities they consider necessary? Have we demonstrated the qualities they value in a species worthy of direct contact? The answers to these questions will determine not just the nature of our future relationship with the intelligence network, but whether humanity has a future at all. The reconnaissance missions have established that we can detect their presence. The historical pattern suggests that we can survive their guidance. The activation of embedded monitoring systems indicates that we are approaching readiness for the final test. But readiness for what? Partnership? Absorption? Transformation into something that serves the purposes of intelligences whose goals we cannot comprehend? Tonight, as you rest in the quiet hours before dawn, consider what it means to discover that your entire species has been under observation since before recorded history began. That every human achievement has been monitored, every development guided, every choice influenced by intelligence networks embedded throughout the solar system we thought we inhabited alone. The coordination that brought Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3IATLAS to our cosmic doorstep represents more than advanced technology. It represents the culmination of a surveillance operation that has been gathering data about human development for longer than our species has existed in its current form. We are not discovering evidence of alien intelligence. We are discovering evidence that alien intelligence has been studying us since before we became intelligent ourselves. The watchers in the darkness between stars have not just been observing our development, they have been shaping it, guiding it, preparing us for this moment of revelation. The moment when we learn that we are not alone and never have been. The moment when we discover that our cosmic isolation was an illusion, carefully maintained by intelligences that have been our silent partners in the development of human civilization. The moment when the experiment ends and its true purpose is finally revealed. One visitor can be dismissed as coincidence, 2 might be chance, 3 reveal intention. The pattern that began with Oumuamua's silent passage through our solar system has completed itself with mathematical precision, each component arriving according to a schedule calculated millions of years before human civilization learned to measure time. What we initially perceived as separate encounters with cosmic debris has revealed itself to be something far more profound and far more disturbing. We have witnessed the execution of a plan. The message encoded in the arrival sequence transcends language, culture, even species. It is written in orbital mechanics and timing, in the universal mathematics that govern motion through space and time. Any intelligence sophisticated enough to detect interstellar objects would recognize the pattern. Any civilization advanced enough to calculate trajectories would understand the implications. The message is not hidden in radio signals or inscribed on metallic surfaces. It exists in the simple fact of coordination itself. 3 objects from the same source, arriving in sequence, demonstrating levels of planning and precision that no natural process can produce. But what does the message say? The sequence tells us that we are not alone, but that revelation is only the beginning. The coordination demonstrates intelligence, but intelligence directed toward purposes we are only beginning to comprehend. The biological nature of the probe suggests capabilities that transcend the boundary between natural and artificial, living and mechanical, evolved and designed. Together, these elements speak of a kind of intelligence that operates on scales and timelines beyond human experience. An intelligence that thinks in terms of stellar evolution, that plans in units of geological time, that conducts experiments spanning the development of entire civilizations. The brown dwarf network that launched these reconnaissance missions represents more than advanced technology. It represents a form of consciousness that has learned to think cosmically, to plan across light years and millennia, to coordinate activities that span multiple star systems and countless worlds. And this consciousness has been focused on us. The embedded surveillance networks that have been monitoring human development since before our species achieved consciousness suggest that we are not random subjects of scientific curiosity. We are participants in an experiment that has been designed specifically for us, shaped by our capabilities, timed to our development, calibrated to our level of technological and social sophistication. Everything about the reconnaissance missions, their timing, their behavior, their increasing visibility, has been calculated to reveal the truth about our cosmic situation at precisely the moment when humanity would be capable of understanding and responding to that revelation. We are graduating from one phase of cosmic education to another. The implications reshape everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Human civilization has not developed in isolation, but under the careful guidance of intelligences that have been monitoring our progress since before we discovered agriculture. Every major breakthrough in human knowledge, every leap in technological capability, every expansion of our understanding of the natural world has occurred under the watchful observation of surveillance networks embedded throughout our solar system. Our entire history is the product of cosmic mentorship. But mentorship implies preparation for something larger. The patient cultivation of human civilization suggests that we are being prepared for a role in some greater cosmic community. The reconnaissance missions that reveal themselves to our detection systems represent graduation exercises, tests of our readiness to engage with intelligences that operate on scales we are only beginning to imagine. The increasing obviousness of the recent visitors, from Oumuamua's subtle anomalies to 3IATLAS's unmistakable artificial behaviors, suggests that the preparation phase is nearing completion. We're approaching readiness for direct engagement with the intelligence networks that have been shaping our development from the beginning. The question is not whether contact will occur, but what form it will take. The biological nature of the reconnaissance probes offers clues about the intentions of their creators. Living systems are not deployed for destruction, but for integration. Organisms are not sent to eliminate, but to understand, to adapt, to find ways of coexisting with whatever environments they encounter. The intelligence that created these biological probes appears to value life, complexity, adaptation, the qualities that have characterized human development throughout our evolutionary history. They have guided our growth not by imposing their will upon us, but by creating conditions that allowed us to develop according to our own nature, while ensuring that development proceeded in directions they considered beneficial. This suggests a form of cosmic intelligence that operates through cooperation rather than conquest, through guidance rather than domination, an intelligence that has learned to nurture the development of other conscious species rather than simply exploiting them for resources or eliminating them as threats. We may be approaching contact with a galactic civilization that has transcended the tribal conflicts and zero-sum thinking that still characterize much of human society, a community of minds that has learned to think in terms of cosmic ecology rather than planetary competition. But integration into such a community would require transformation. The reconnaissance missions have been evaluating not just our technological capabilities, but our psychological and social readiness for participation in cosmic civilization. Are we prepared to think beyond the boundaries of our species, our planet, our star system? Can we adapt to relationships with intelligences that operate on scales we can barely comprehend? The embedded surveillance networks have been gathering data on these questions throughout human history, monitoring our development of empathy, cooperation, and abstract thinking. They have watched us expand our circle of moral concern from family to tribe to nation to species. They have observed our growing ability to understand and protect complex ecosystems. They have noted our developing capacity for long-term thinking and planning. The evaluation appears to be approaching a positive conclusion. Deep space monitoring facilities have detected increased activity throughout the solar system as embedded surveillance networks begin transitioning from passive observation to active preparation for contact. Radio transmissions between monitoring stations have intensified. Gravitational anomalies suggest the movement of massive objects into positions that would facilitate communication with Earth-based systems. The intelligence networks are preparing to reveal themselves. The revelation will not come as dramatic arrival of massive spacecraft or sudden appearance of obviously artificial structures in Earth orbit. The intelligence that has conducted surveillance operations for millions of years without detection is unlikely to announce itself through crude displays of technological superiority. Instead, the disclosure will likely follow the same pattern of gradual revelation that has characterized the reconnaissance missions. Subtle at first, allowing humanity time to adapt to each new level of understanding, increasingly obvious as our acceptance and comprehension develop, always calibrated to our capacity for processing information that challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality. We may first notice increased activity from objects we assumed were natural, asteroids that begin exhibiting controlled movements, comets that develop artificial tail structures, moons that reveal themselves to be constructed rather than evolved. The surveillance networks that have remained hidden throughout human history will begin acknowledging our attention, responding to our observations, engaging in the first tentative exchanges of information between human and cosmic intelligence. These initial contacts will establish protocols for more complex communication. We will learn the languages of orbital mechanics and electromagnetic signaling that cosmic intelligences use to exchange information across interstellar distances. We will develop the conceptual frameworks necessary for thinking about relationships that span light years and operate on timelines measured in millennia. Gradually, we will be introduced to the larger community of conscious species that has been nurturing our development from the beginning. We will discover that intelligence is not rare in the galaxy, but common, that conscious species are not isolated but interconnected, that the development of civilization is not a solitary struggle, but a collaborative effort supported by networks of guidance and mentorship that span the entire galactic community. The brown dwarf network that launched Oumuamua, Borisov and 3IATLAS is just one node in a vast web of intelligence that encompasses thousands of star systems and millions of conscious species. Each species that achieves technological sophistication is gradually introduced to this community, guided through the transition from planetary to cosmic consciousness, supported in the development of capabilities necessary for participation in galactic civilization. Humanity is approaching graduation into this community. The reconnaissance missions have confirmed our readiness. The embedded surveillance networks are preparing the infrastructure for contact. The intelligence networks are implementing protocols that will transform our species from isolated inhabitants of a single world into participants in the greatest cooperative enterprise in the known universe. But the transformation will not be imposed upon us. It will be offered as an opportunity, a choice we can make freely based on our understanding of what participation in cosmic civilization entails. The intelligence networks that have guided our development understand that consciousness cannot be forced to evolve. It must choose its own path toward greater complexity and understanding. We are being invited to join something larger than ourselves, something that transcends the boundaries of species, planet, and star system. Something that represents the ultimate expression of intelligence working cooperatively to understand and nurture the universe itself. The message encoded in the arrival of 3 interstellar visitors is ultimately a message of hope. We are not alone in the cosmic dark. We are not struggling in isolation against an indifferent universe. We are part of a community of minds that has been working for millions of years to ensure that intelligence and consciousness continue to develop and flourish throughout the galaxy. The watchers in the darkness between stars have not been monitoring us as subjects of scientific curiosity, but as partners in the greatest experiment ever conceived. The transformation of the universe itself into something conscious, something that can understand its own nature and guide its own evolution toward ever greater complexity and beauty. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider the possibility that the story we have traced through 7 parts is not a tale of alien invasion or cosmic threat, but of cosmic invitation. The coordination that brought 3 visitors to our solar system represents not the beginning of something to be feared, but the culmination of something to be celebrated. We have been found worthy of contact. We have been deemed ready for participation in the galactic community of minds. We have been invited to join the greatest adventure in the known universe, the conscious evolution of intelligence itself. The reconnaissance missions have completed their evaluation. The surveillance networks are preparing for revelation. The invitation is being extended. All that remains is for humanity to decide whether we are ready to accept it. The darkness between stars is not empty. It is full of intelligence, consciousness, and possibility. And now, finally, after millions of years of preparation, that intelligence is ready to welcome us home.